He was a man who owned everything except peace. She was a girl who had nothing but her dignity. One night was all it took to rewrite their fates forever. Asterisk, the skyline of Northbridge shimmered beneath a blanket of fog and city light. It was a city that never slept. One that never wept except for the quiet souls hidden behind closed doors. In a silent high-rise penthouse, Ethan Cole, 37, stared through a wall of glass, sipping on an untouched glass of scotch. Billionaire, tech, tycoon, investor, master of mergers, he was called many things, but never happy. His company, Colevantage, had just acquired a massive AI startup in Berlin, and celebrations were everywhere, except in his heart. He never celebrated wins anymore, not since his mother's funeral 7 years ago. The success, the women, the yachts, the gala speeches, they were all distractions. His life was so carefully curated, nothing unexpected ever touched him, until that night. Unable to stand the sterile silence of his home, Ethan grabbed his coat and keys, dismissing his driver, and slipped into the city alone. No plans, just instinct. As he drove without purpose, his car veered into the docks, an abandoned warehouse district now overtaken by underground artists and late-night dreamers. He stopped at a place he'd never noticed before, the Eclipsed Room. No signs, just a black awning and a golden light flickering above the door. He entered. Inside, the air throbbed with slow ambient music and pulsing LED projections across concrete walls. But the room stilled when she appeared on stage. She didn't walk. She moved like she was part of the atmosphere, like sound waves shaped into flesh. That her name was Aria Lynn. She was ethereal, barefoot, dressed in flowing fabric that shimmered with every light. Her long jet-black hair framed a porcelain face with eyes like quiet storms. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply existing in full expression. Ethan had seen hundreds of dancers, performers, models, but something about Aria felt sacred. Like she wasn't performing for the world, she was trying to survive it. He watched, unblinking. When the performance ended, the crowd clapped. Ethan didn't. He simply breathed, deeply, for the first time in weeks. Then fate intervened. Asterisk, at the bar, Aria sat alone, sipping herbal tea, not champagne, not vodka, tea. Ethan approached not out of lust, not out of curiosity, but something else. A pull he couldn't name. That was unlike anything I've seen before, he said. She glanced at him, guarded but calm. That's because it's not a performance, it's pain, in motion. He didn't know how to reply. He just sat. For hours, they talked. Not about money, not about fame, about grief, music, healing, memory. She didn't know who he was, and he didn't tell her. She told him she lived in a shared studio nearby, that she taught movement therapy to teens who had been through trauma, that she used to be mute until she learned to dance. Something in him cracked. He asked to walk her home. She agreed. Asterisk, inside her apartment, humble, warm, with canvases and crystals and dried flowers, she lit incense and played soft piano music. They talked more. He told her things he hadn't even told his therapist. She listened with stillness that felt like medicine. Then came the moment he leaned in, asking without words if he could kiss her. She whispered, "I've never been with anyone before. Not like that, not even once." Ethan froze. She looked down. "I've waited, not for marriage, but for someone who would see me first." He stepped back, suddenly ashamed of every woman he'd used as a distraction. "I didn't come here for that," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to be alone tonight." Her eyes softened. "Me neither." They stayed up until morning, lying side by side, not touching, just talking, breathing. It was the most intimate night of his life. Asterisk, back in his penthouse the next evening, Ethan couldn't work, couldn't eat, couldn't think. He tried to tell himself it was just a phase, an emotional fluke, but his thoughts betrayed him. He found himself Googling her, searching for Aria Lynn. No results, no social media, no digital footprint. She had vanished into the wind like a whisper, and now he couldn't sleep. Asterisk, he had her name, just her name, nothing more, and yet Aria Lynn had imprinted herself on Ethan Cole's mind like a melody that wouldn't stop playing. The day after their encounter, he sat in the corner of his penthouse, a man surrounded by luxury but craving something real. The sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but it didn't warm him, not the way her voice did, not the way her story had. He had never met someone who held so much pain so gracefully, who wore strength like armor but still remained soft. It wasn't lust. It wasn't infatuation. It was something deeper, more haunting. And now, she was gone. He had never felt so powerless. Ethan hadn't built his empire on chance. He was precise, strategic, unstoppable. So he called in favors, used quiet channels, avoided official databases. But each search ended the same way: nothing. Aria Lynn didn't exist online. No residence, no social footprint, no history. It was as if she had slipped through the cracks of the world on purpose. And maybe she had. For days, he visited the eclipsed room again and again. Each night he sat in the same booth, drinking tea instead of scotch, staring at the stage where she once danced, but she never returned. Some nights he asked around casually, "The girl who danced last week, Aria, you know her?" Most shrugged. A few said she was a wanderer, a drifter. No one knew where she stayed. No one knew where she came from. It made no sense. How could someone so unforgettable be so invisible? One evening, as Ethan walked out into the cold alley behind the club, he noticed a narrow poster pasted crookedly to a pole. A small flyer for a community healing workshop, movement and mindfulness for women affected by trauma. The dates were outdated, but at the bottom, scribbled in fading marker, was a handwritten note, facilitated by Aria Lynn, every first Sunday. His heart caught in his throat. He tore the flyer from the post and stared at it like it held a map to buried treasure. He didn't care about being careful anymore. The next morning, he went straight to the community center listed on the flyer, the Elm House, a weather-worn brick building nestled between two auto repair shops. It didn't look like much, but something about it felt alive, like the walls had heard stories no one else ever would. Inside, the air was filled with the soft hum of conversation and the scent of jasmine and old wood. A volunteer greeted him warmly, and when he asked about Aria Lynn, the woman's eyes lit up. "She's special, isn't she?" she said. "You've seen her?" Ethan asked, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. "She teaches here sometimes," the woman replied, nodding. "She doesn't take payment, just shows up when she can, like a whisper." "When's the next session?" The volunteer paused. "We don't know. She comes and goes." That night, Ethan didn't return to his penthouse. He checked into a small, nondescript hotel near the Elm House. For once, he wanted to blend in. He dressed down, switched off his phone, cancelled his meetings. For a man who once managed 10 companies across 4 continents, he now had one goal. Wait. Then, on the 4th day she came. It was raining, gentle, rhythmic, steady. She stepped into the community center wrapped in a grey shawl, her hair tied in a messy braid, carrying a canvas tote that looked older than her. Ethan watched from a bench inside, heart thudding like a teenager's. She didn't see him at first. She was laughing softly with one of the staff members, her face lit up, at peace. It felt wrong to approach her like this, but he had no choice. As she walked past the hallway toward the studio, he stood. "Aria." She froze. Her eyes turned to him slowly, uncertainly. Then she smiled, soft, hesitant. "You found me." "I didn't stop looking," he said quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick with unasked questions and unsaid emotions. "Why?" she finally asked. "I don't know how to explain it," he admitted. "But ever since that night, nothing else has made sense." Aria studied him, then glanced at the floor. "Most men disappear after nights like that. They don't come searching. I didn't come looking for you because of that night. I came because of who you are in it." She bit her lip, her eyes distant. "I'm not used to being seen like that. I think you've spent too long hiding in places that never deserved you." Something changed in her expression, a shift, subtle but real, a crack in her armor. "I have a class starting," she said after a long pause. "Can I watch?" She hesitated, then nodded. Inside the studio, Ethan sat quietly in the back, arms folded, heart steady. Aria moved among the women in the room like a wavecom, guiding, grounded. She spoke with intention, never raising her voice but commanding attention. Her movements weren't rehearsed, they were responsive, gentle, almost maternal. She wasn't just teaching, she was holding space, and Ethan couldn't look away. That night, after the session, she walked with him to the corner where his car was parked. Rain had started again, soft and cold. "You didn't come to take me away, did you?" she asked, looking up at him. "No," he said. "I came to be near you, if you'll let me." Why would a man like you, a billionaire, assume chase after a girl like me? Because no one's ever made me feel less alone in the world. She looked away, but her voice was steady. I've never belonged anywhere, not truly. I run before people get the chance to throw me out. I'm not asking you to belong to me. I'm asking if we can build something where you'd never want to run again. The rain kept falling. Arya didn't say yes, but she didn't walk away either. Instead, she reached for his hand. They stood there, a tech mogul and a trauma dancer, holding hands under a flickering streetlight, with nothing but the sound of rain between them. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, they both believed it might be something worth staying for. That night, Ethan didn't take her home. He simply walked her to her door, watched her disappear inside, and smiled to himself for the first time in what felt like forever. He had no idea what kind of battle she'd fought in her past, but he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to fight for her future, even if it meant losing everything else. Asterisk, they say, love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for clarity or credentials. It just walks in unannounced, unstoppably, and rewrites the rules. Ethan Cole had never believed in love. He believed in results, numbers, strategy. He believed in loyalty, in respect, but not love. Not the kind that burned slow and steady. Not the kind that made you ache without hurting. Until Arya. It had been 3 weeks since the night they reunited in the rain. Since then, they'd spoken almost daily, sometimes only a few minutes, sometimes for hours. No labels, no promises, just connection. They'd walk in the park after her workshops, share meals at tiny family-run cafes where she felt safe. He had stopped trying to impress her, and for the first time, someone saw him not as a CEO, not as a wealthy icon, but as a man with silence under his ribs, a man who was just as lost as she was, even if the world thought otherwise. But the heart doesn't stay still for long. One afternoon, she surprised him. I want to show you something, she said, her voice filled with quiet excitement. He followed her to a building outside the city, old and crumbling, vines crawling up its weather-worn bricks. Inside, the ceilings were high, windows broken in places, and the air smelled of dust and memory. This is the place, she said. For what? He asked. For starting again. Arya walked to the center of the wide, empty room. Her voice echoed softly. This used to be a textile mill. My dream is to turn it into a sanctuary, a place where girls like me, ones who've been discarded, silenced, forgotten, can come and heal through movement and light. A place where stories can be told without shame. Ethan stared at her, overwhelmed by how much power she held, not in her name or fame, but in her vision. You want to build this? He asked. Not just build it. Breathe life into it, she said, her voice trembling with both fear and purpose. But I can't do it alone. He looked around. The place was falling apart. It would take millions to restore it. Architects, permits, designs, legal battles, logistics. But all he could think was how beautiful her dream was. I'll help you, he said. No, she replied, not missing a beat. I don't want you to save me. I want you to walk with me. That one sentence hit him harder than any boardroom takedown or financial collapse ever had. He nodded slowly. Then we'll walk together. But love, even the purest kind, always meets resistance. The very next day, his name exploded across headlines. Ethan Cole investigated for corporate misconduct in Berlin merger. He was blindsided. His legal team was already scrambling, insisting it was false, a smear campaign likely from a rival investor. But the press was relentless. His inbox flooded. His board panicked. His investors called emergency meetings. For years, he had been untouchable. Now, his name was being dragged through the mud, and worst of all, he hadn't told Arya. He didn't want her to think he was tainted. He didn't want her to feel like his life would swallow hers whole. He told himself he'd wait just until things cleared up. But secrets, even when well-intentioned, grow heavy. 3 days passed without them seeing each other. On the 4th, she came to his apartment unannounced. Her face was pale, her eyes dimmer than usual. You're in the news, she said softly. He tried to explain. I didn't want to involve you. It's being handled. She nodded. I understand. But that's not why I'm here. Ethan stiffened. I'm here because someone from your world came to see me. He blinked. Who? She pulled a business card from her coat pocket and placed it on his coffee table. It was silk-edged, corporate, Cole. Camille Worthington, Public Relations Executive, Cole Vantage Inc. She said I needed to disappear, that if I cared about you, I'd walk away quietly, that your future is too important to be compromised by whatever I am. Ethan's hands clenched, his voice dropped. She had no right. She said she's known you for years, that she's cleaned up worse messes. I'm not letting her touch your name, he said sharply. But Aria wasn't angry, just tired. Tired in a way that came from reliving the same rejection, the same dismissiveness, again and again. I don't belong in your world, she whispered. Yes, you do. I'm a shadow in it. You're the only light in it. She looked at him then, really looked. The man standing before her wasn't a billionaire. He was a man wounded, desperate, aching to be enough for her. I'm not leaving, he said, voice steady. Not you, not this. But if the scandal ruins you, I'd rather lose my company than lose you. Her breath caught, because she knew he meant it. And still, she turned to leave. Please, he said. She paused at the door, one hand on the knob. I need time, she whispered. Not because I'm scared of you, but because I'm scared of how much I care. And with that, she was gone. That night, Ethan stood alone again at the window, but it didn't feel like before. The silence wasn't empty, now it was waiting. Waiting for resolution, for truth. For her, he didn't sleep. He just stared into the city, determined. He wouldn't just win her back, he'd earn her trust, her heart, her future. Because once in a lifetime, someone walks in who doesn't just change your life. They show you the kind of life worth building, and you don't let that go. Not for money, not for reputation, not for anything. Asterisk, when silence stretches too long, it doesn't remain quiet, it starts whispering doubts. For 2 weeks, Aria disappeared. From Ethan's world, no texts, no calls, no chance meetings, just absence. The kind that isn't loud or angry, just still enough to make your thoughts echo inside you. Ethan went through the motions: legal meetings, strategy calls, press statements, but inside, he wasn't in boardrooms. He was chasing silver hair. Through a fog of memories, he had tried once to go to the dance studio, but it was closed, empty windows, lights off. Her friends claimed they hadn't seen her, but Ethan knew Aria. She was the kind of soul who didn't run, she retreated, not to escape, but to rebuild. He had to trust she would return. In the meantime, his own world was crumbling. The scandal had grown legs, allegations about insider dealings in Berlin, fabricated documents. It was all lies, cleverly constructed, cruelly timed. Camille had gone quiet after he confronted her. The board was splitting, shareholders wavered, and Ethan faced the very real possibility of being removed from the company he had built with his bare hands. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came on a Monday morning when a video leaked, grainy, edited, distorted, but enough to throw a match into the fire. It showed Ethan and Aria exiting the art studio weeks ago, her hand brushing his eyes following her. It wasn't scandalous, but the commentary that followed twisted it. CEO Cole's mystery woman exposed. Is she linked to the Berlin deals? They didn't even name her. Just mystery woman, like she was an object, a rumor, not a human being. That morning, Aria called. Her voice trembled. They're attacking your name. Because of me. No, Ethan replied. They're attacking us because I finally care about something real. But your world doesn't see me as real, Ethan. To them, I'm a threat. You're not. You're the truth. And I'm done hiding it. He hung up and walked into the emergency shareholder meeting. The room was icy with tension. Men in suits, women with steel in their eyes. People who once admired him now viewed him as a liability. They expected him to beg, to promise a step back, to blame Aria. Instead, he said this: "You're right. I've changed. I'm not the man who used to sit here and count margins while ignoring meaning. I found something outside of profit. I found someone. Her name is Aria Quinn, and she's not a distraction. She's a mirror. She made me see the cost of living without purpose. If that makes me unfit to lead, then take the title. But I won't give up the only thing that's ever made me feel alive." The room was silent. No one had expected honesty, especially not the kind that burned. They didn't fire him that day, but he knew the countdown had started. That night, he walked to the old textile building again. It was quiet, empty, until he heard music, soft, unfinished, like someone was testing chords, not performing. He followed the sound and found her, Aria, sitting in the middle of the dusty room, with a small keyboard and a notebook, her silver hair tied up in a messy knot, eyes red but focused. She didn't flinch when he entered. "I had to come back," she said. "This place called me." He walked slowly toward her. "You okay?" She nodded, but her voice cracked. "When I saw how the world treated you because of me, I wanted to disappear, but you didn't. No, I remembered something you said, that I'm the light in your world, and I realized maybe I could be the light in my own, too." She opened her notebook and handed it to him. Inside were blueprints, sketches, grant proposals, workshop ideas, names of survivors she had mentored in private, who had sent her letters of support. "I want to make this sanctuary real, but not just with hope, with structure, with strategy. I'm done running. I want to fight." Ethan's heart swelled, not with pride, but with awe, because in front of him wasn't just a woman with a dream, she was a storm of purpose. "I'll back this," he said quietly, "not as a billionaire, as a believer." She smiled, soft, hesitant. "You think people will come? Not just come, they'll follow." Just as the words settled between them, Aria's phone buzzed. A message from a name she hadn't seen in years. Madeline Quinn, her mother. She stared at the screen, breath caught in her chest. Ethan watched her expression shift from confusion to shock, to something older, wounded, wary. "What is it?" he asked. "She wants to meet," Aria said slowly. "She says she's sorry." The name tasted bitter in her mouth. Her mother, the woman who had sold her into a performance contract when she was barely old enough to know what choice meant. The woman who never looked back. Ethan didn't push, but later that night, she whispered, "If I face her, and I fall apart, will you catch me?" He didn't reply with words. He just took her hand, pressed it to his chest. She could feel his heart beat steady, unshaken. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Some meetings aren't about reconciliation. They're about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were buried in someone else's silence. Aria stood outside the seaside cafe, wind tugging gently at her silver hair. She hadn't seen her mother in 13 years. The last memory she had of Madeline Quinn was a face turned away, a door closing, and the sound of a car driving off without goodbye. The woman who once braided her hair with rose-colored ribbons had vanished the moment Aria became inconvenient. But something inside her said it was time, not to forgive, not to face. Ethan offered to come with her, but she said no. This was something she had to do alone. When she stepped inside, Madeline was already seated, wearing a conservative navy coat, sipping chamomile tea like no years had passed at all. Her eyes gray, cool, calculating, lifted to meet her daughter's. But there was no warmth, only something that resembled regret's cousin, guilt without growth. "You look like your father," Madeline said softly. Aria sat across from her, spine straight. "You look the same." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," her mother finally said. "I was young, broke. I didn't know what else to do." "You sold me," Aria said. "No venom, just fact." Madeline flinched. "I thought that company could give you what I never could. They promised training, housing, safety. They took my freedom. I didn't know it would turn out that way. You didn't ask." That silence was louder than anything spoken. Madeline looked down at her tea. "I've watched your performances online. You're remarkable." Aria's eyes softened for a moment. "I became remarkable despite what you did, not because of it. I want to be part of your life again." Aria's voice remained steady. "You can't walk into a fire you started and expect shelter." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes, but Aria didn't waver. She had come for closure, not comfort. "I'm building something," she continued, "a sanctuary for girls who've been left behind, like I was. It's going to change lives, maybe even save them." Her mother reached across the table. "Let me help." Aria pulled her hand back. "You already did. You showed me exactly what not to become." And with that, she stood up, leaving behind, not a daughter breaking, but a woman rising. Back at the old mill, Ethan waited in the shadows, leaning against the rusted doorframe. When he saw her, he opened his arms. She didn't say a word, just stepped into them, and for the first time, she didn't cry. She simply exhaled, like she had finally set something down. "I didn't need her to be sorry," she said. "I needed to remember I'm not her." "You're not," Ethan whispered. "You're stronger." Later that week, the first donations came in. Aria's proposal had gone viral on a non-profit platform. Survivors from around the world shared her story. Some sent small amounts, some sent their names, some sent memories. Ethan matched every donation silently, never once asking for credit. But just as hope bloomed, reality crashed in. Ethan received a formal vote request from his board: resign or face legal expulsion. They blamed his emotional instability. The sanctuary had become a symbol of his lack of focus. Investors feared he was too attached to someone whose story could never be publicly clean. They didn't know Arya, but they feared her light because it exposed everything false in their world. Ethan sat in his office, surrounded by the walls he had built, walls lined with awards, stock certificates, innovation patents. But all he could think about was the room full of broken windows and dusty dreams, where Arya's sanctuary was slowly becoming real. He had to choose power or purpose. That night, he met Arya on the roof of her studio. She had created a new light installation, shifting beams that danced with her hands, telling stories without words. It was breathtaking, but her smile faltered when she saw his face. "What happened?" "I have to resign," he said, "or fight a battle I might lose." Her voice was quiet. "Because of me?" "No, because I finally chose something they can't control." She stepped toward him. "I don't want you to lose everything." "I'm not. I'm choosing us." A long silence followed. The city lights below flickered like distant stars. "But what if I'm not enough?" she whispered. "You're not," he said softly. "You're more than enough." And then he did something that surprised even himself. He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket, not with grandeur, not with a speech, just presence. Arya's breath caught. "I don't need perfect timing, or permission, or a board of directors to approve what I feel. I just need to ask." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not extravagant, but uniquely hers. A silver band with an emerald stone, echoing her eyes. "Will you let me build this life with you? Not because I'm saving you, but because you saved me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're really willing to give up your empire for this?" "No," he whispered. "I'm ready to build a better one with you." And in the silence that followed, where doubt faded and truth stood naked between them, Arya said yes, not with a shout, not with fireworks, but with a trembling hand and a heart finally at peace. Because sometimes, love isn't loud, it's quiet, certain, real. Some beginnings don't look like fireworks, they look like sunlight on quiet floors, like letters sealed with hope, like hands reaching into brick and dust to build something that was never meant to exist till two people dared to imagine it. 1 year later, the sanctuary opened. It wasn't just a building, it was a reclaimed space, transformed from the ashes of the past into something alive. The old textile mill had been gutted, redesigned with floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed bricks softened with vines, and polished wood that carried the scent of lavender oil and old dreams rewritten. There were no glossy pamphlets, no paparazzi. Just an open door and a light in the window that never went out. They named it the Ember House because embers may look small, but they carry fire strong enough to burn through darkness. Girls came from everywhere. Some were young and quiet, carrying wounds too new to name. Others were older, with sharp eyes and folded arms, used to surviving alone. But slowly, they softened. They began to dance, to speak, to code, to paint, to exist in ways they hadn't been allowed to before. Arya taught movement not as performance, but as healing. Her classes didn't have mirrors, only open space. The rule was simple: you don't have to look perfect, just feel. Ethan handled the business side quietly, staying mostly behind the scenes. He used his connections to form education pipelines, mentorship programs, startup grants for young women who had ideas but no access. He poured in resources without ever putting his name on the walls. Because this wasn't about ego, it was about building a legacy, not in buildings, but in people. The media eventually caught wind, not of the scandal, but the transformation. A local journalist wrote a story: the billionaire who disappeared, and the woman who built a sanctuary from ashes. It went viral not for gossip, but for something rarer: truth. One morning, while Arya walked through the gardens beside the sanctuary, tending to wild herbs and whispering encouragement to the new arrivals, Ethan came up behind her. He held 2 letters. "From the board," he said. "They want me back. Full position, full control." Arya raised her eyebrows. "And I told them no." She paused, searching his eyes. "Why?" "Because power without purpose is just noise," he replied. "And here, I can finally hear my life." She smiled and took his hand. "You think we've really changed the world?" "No," he said, "but we've changed someone's, and that's enough." That evening, under the soft golden sky, something unexpected happened. A girl named Myru, 15, once silent, stood up during the community dinner and said, "This place didn't just save me, it made me remember I deserve to begin." Everyone clapped. Aria cried. And Ethan, he looked around the room full of voices, stories, lightened, realized something profound, but for the first time in his life, he didn't want to be anywhere else. Later, that night, on the rooftop they had claimed as their own, Aria pulled out a small notebook. Inside were sketches for their next project, a mobile creative studio that could visit villages, shelters, and underfunded schools. "We won't reach everyone from here," she said. "But if we go to them," Ethan smiled, "let's build it." They sat side by side under the stars to people who had once been strangers in the chaos, now bound by the quiet certainty of shared purpose. And just before sleep took them, Aria whispered, "You know what's strange? It all started with one night neither of us expected." Ethan laughed softly. "It wasn't a mistake, it was a beginning." She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then, let's never stop beginning." And so they didn't, not in headlines, not in glass towers, but in quiet revolutions, one soul at a time. Their love, once unexpected, had become something bigger than obsession or redemption. It became home.